Raid for the Atari 2600 came out during the tail end of 1982. Published by Activision, the game was programmed and designed by Carol Shaw, who is generally regarded as one of the first female game designers in the industry. If you're not aware already, Activision games are usually pretty good, but does this 8-bit vertical scrolling shooter worth it today? Well, let's find out. It's an Atari game, so don't expect any grand stories to be told. There are a few exceptions, such as Atlantis, but for the most part, the story is left up to the player's imagination. For River Raid, I could think that maybe you are a pilot on a top-secret mission to take on the enemy forces along the river. It's most likely a suicide mission, since you are simply trying to get as many points as possible by destroying the enemy forces. It's a war game, and at its most basic level, the subject matter is at least interesting for this type of game. Atari games are just plain and ugly, there is no going around that. We are talking about an 8-bit console here, but River Raid at least tries with the environments and enemy designs. I know exactly what all the sprites are supposed to be, and nothing is so obscure that I can't figure out what I'm looking at. Graphics are good for the time overall. Similar to the graphics, Atari games really don't have much music, with some exceptions like Pitfall 1 and 2, but the sound for the game is good for the time. You can hear the plane go faster and slower, firing your missiles is satisfying, and destroying enemies also has a nice effect. It does everything right in all the right ways. All Atari games are simple when it comes to the controls, this game being no exception. The red button fires missiles towards the enemies, and the joystick allows the player to move in the horizontal axis, with the ability to pull up on the joystick to accelerate and to pull down to slow down. Changing the difficulty sliders on the Atari will allow the player to control the missiles after they have been fired, but this is up to your play style if you prefer that or not. The player's lives, points, and fuel gauge are listed at the bottom of the screen, and we will get into the specifics of those later. The gameplay is the real star here, and has some fun mechanics that keep you coming back for more. The main kicker is that your plane has a limited amount of fuel, and as you play, your fuel gauge slowly goes down. When it reaches 0, you will lose your plane. Going faster will speed up your fuel loss, and slowing down will make it go down slower. Not to fear, however, simply running into fuel barrels will replenish your tanks, and they are in plentiful supply, so you never really have to run out of fuel. Running into enemies, their missiles, or the sides of the river will cause you to lose a plane also. In total, there are 4 different enemies: tankers, helicopters, jets, and bridges. Each can be destroyed and each will yield a different point value, tankers being the least and bridges being the most. Fuel can also be destroyed for points, so you will need to choose whether you need fuel or points as you play. This is a fun game mechanic and adds a little more strategy in how you play. At the end of each stage, there will be a bridge in which will serve as your checkpoint. If you ever lose a plane, you will respawn at the last bridge location. Something interesting you will notice while playing is that the levels are not random, and actually they repeat in the same exact way you play each time. This is super interesting for the time, since most Atari games were set up with a random number generator, making each playthrough different, but River Raid uses a pseudo-random number generator to give the players more tailored experience. The gameplay, for lack of a better word, is good. Not the best out there, but it does the job and it does it well. I think for an Atari, it is one of the best in terms of gameplay, and it stands in terms of today's standards. Most of how I review retro games has a lot to do with the time periods that they were made in. I do this because hardware limitations mostly, but also because the times were just different back then, and people also had a different mentality and threshold for what made games good. Fun factor, however, is always compared to today's point of view, because if you're looking to buy these games today, it doesn't matter if it was great for its time, because if it's not fun to play today, you probably shouldn't waste your time getting it. River Raid is a prime example of a game that was fun back in its day, but also a ton of fun to play today. Sure, it's simple, and it's dumb fun, and when I feel in the mood to play an Atari 2600 game, River Raid is almost always at the top of my list. You can jump into this game with literally no learning curve, and either have 5 minutes of fun, or a few hours of fun with it. I also love showing this game off to friends who have never played an Atari game, just because it shows how fun some of these games really are today. Current listings as of 2022 shows a loose price average of $9.87, with a roughly 70-cent price increase per year. If you are trying to get into Atari 2600 games, or even retro games in general, I don't think you can go wrong with River Raid. It's one of the best Atari games on the system, and even outshines a lot of NES games in terms of sheer fun factor. Although the prices have gone up pretty substantially in recent years, River Raid is one of the best games on the system, and for $10, I think it's a good deal for what you're getting. River Raid is really a must-buy for the console, and I fully recommend it. Have you ever played River Raid? Then tell us about it in the comments below. Or if you have any other Atari games you want us to recommend for a review. If you enjoyed our content, subscribe and like because it really helps out. Till next time, this is The Thrift Gamer.